let's talk about this Project Veritas video. They targeted a mid-level management guy at Pfizer to go out on a date with a guy a couple of times, I think it was. The employee is a guy named Jordan Walker. He is, do we know exactly what his title was? He's like a director, Yeah, I'll try. And it's fascinating the way this is being spun by Veritas. The guy talks about conversations that they've had and about procedures that would go forward. And they're just throwing this around, but I don't know that it's legal for them to do this. But the idea of, they call it, what is it, the evolution?
Mutation. I think they say evolution in this video. I mean, and I gotta say, like, I'm not sure what this guy's actual title is, because I mean, Larry Elder, who I don't believe is a credible person, says he's just the Pfizer Director of Research and Development. I don't think that's the case.
He is not the director.
Right.
He is a director. Director is a term like above manager, but below, executive vice president type of thing or something like that in the corporate structure.
They're talking about this term direct evolution.
Direct evolution.
To gain of function.
Yes. Gain of function is where you take a virus and you enhance all of its most sort of like virulent aspects. Maybe it's contagiousness, maybe it's lethality as a way of studying it. The directed evolution is where you create a controlled environment and you let the virus mutate as it would in the natural world, but you accelerate that so that you can anticipate what may be future variants of this disease, so you can create vaccines that would preempt it. Just understand these are two different things. I'm not saying that there's, either one is something that we should be doing in these places, but they're two different things, and they conflate these because one is theoretically the controlled evolution is not in any way changing the trajectory of the virus, but rather a way to track where it may head in the future. This guy's talking about monkeys in a laboratory. You put them together, you take one, and then you inject it into another, and you see where it mutates, so that you can get out in front of the vaccines. Now, make no mistake about it. As far as I'm concerned, these vaccines should be property of the United States government. We paid for the development of these. There should be allowed a profit for the pharmaceutical companies, but it should be capped by the U.S. government. This should be our property.
And contingent on the intellectual property protections being waived so that it could be used for people internationally without them having to go to Pfizer or Moderna.
So I hold no, hold no water for Pfizer, but let's just be clear what this is. This is not about taking on corporations who get funded by the U.S. government and then try and privatize the profits here. This is about promoting an anti-vax conspiracy theory. And this is the way they do it. So this first clip is, about that sort of conflating gain of function with the controlled evolution.
Meet Jordan Tristan Walker, a director of research and development strategic operations and mRNA scientific planning at Pfizer.
It sounds like gain of function to me.
I don't know, it's a little bit different. I think it's different. It's like it's definitely not gain of function. It sounds like it is. I mean, it's okay. No, directed evolution is very different. Well, you're not supposed to do gain of function research with the viruses. They recommend not. But you do these selected directional mutations to try to see if you can make more potent.
Yeah.
So there is research ongoing about that. I don't know how that's going to work. There might not be any more outbreaks, just like Jesus Christ.
The gentleman seems to have absolutely no moral compass at all.
Now they bring on now this just gives away the game, right? Because they bring on an anti-vaxxer, this Dr. Malone, to, I guess, assess the moral value of this one guy who works at the at Pfizer. Now, look, this guy may or may not be moral. He may be, you know, first of all, I think it's highly inappropriate to have these conversations even on a date, particularly in our first date. But the idea that they're bringing this guy on. Now, I wanted to go into the second half of the video when
Can I just say on the Malone thing, like that he's supposedly he claimed to be the inventor of mRNA, and then subsequently, like that's been I think debunked a little bit, but that he has to go immediately to psychoanalysis. Like,
well, exactly. That's my point. Like, you know, you don't need Malone to come on and say that.
He looks like he has no morality. Like, okay,
yeah,
thanks,
the
Doc.
shape of his skull is a little bit suspect.
Go a little bit before where you have here, because I want to see when O'Keefe, you know, does his assessment of what's just been said, because he twists it. All right, right there. Yeah.
Skulls everywhere.
Something crazy.
Fact is the way that the virus started in Wuhan. To be honest, like it makes no sense that this virus popped out of nowhere. Like,
Yeah, I know.
COVID virus experimentation on live monkeys? This is unethical, to say the least, and Walker describes those experiments as if they are ongoing and not simply a hypothetical discussion.
So, I mean, when is Pfizer going to implement the mutation of all these viruses?
I don't know. It depends on how the experiments work out. Because this is just like something at a time, right?
It sounds like gain of function to me.
I don't know. It's a little bit different. I think it's different. It's like it's definitely not gain of function.
Sounds like it is. I mean, it's okay.
No, directed evolution is very different.
Direct evolution?
Directed evolution.
Directed evolution, okay. Well, so, I mean, is that what it is?
Maybe. I don't know. Well, you're not supposed to do gain of function research.
Pause it for a second. Now, like they're jumping around and cutting quite a bit, but it's quite clear the guy's saying like, no, it's not gain of function. And now he's like, you know, and it's also quite clear that he doesn't really know the specifics about this stuff.
Yeah,
this is
pretty
more,
uninformed.
This is more like he's talking about stuff that he's hearing vaguely from other parts of the company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like inappropriate for him to talk about this. The guy's goading him, trying to make conversation. It's just,
if there was a conspiracy, he would be much more tight-lipped about this.
Yeah, he's trying to flirt. I mean, it's messed up. It's messed up that he thinks he's on the date and he's getting filmed for this. Like,
totally messed up.
Right.
It's like, they recommend not. But you do like these like selected directional mutations to try to see if you can make more potent.
Yeah.
So there is research ongoing about that. I don't know how that's gonna work. There might not be any more outbreaks because like Jesus Christ.
So tell me more. Like,
now pause it. Now understand. He could be talking about research that's ongoing, because of course there's ongoing research. I would presume about COVID, not necessarily at Pfizer. But they jump cut to where like a part of the conversation where he is talking about Pfizer. Now, Pfizer may be doing these experiments. There's no way Pfizer's just doing these experiments like, hey, let's go down to the garage and do these experiments. If Project Veritas wants to do a big expose on how animals are used in research, I think that's
worthwhile.
Definitely worthwhile.
Check out
but
Neuralink.
The idea that this is happening like, you know, exclusively in the context of COVID. And I will also say, like, if there is a hierarchy of when it's more appropriate to test things on animals, I would imagine a pandemic is pretty far up there.
Yeah, 1 million deaths in the country. Yeah.
With the whole, virus mutation process.
Well, they're still kind of conducting the experiments on it, but it seems like from what I've heard, they're kind of optimizing it, but they're going slow. They were very cautious,
Right.
From what I've heard,
this is so non-committal.
This is like somebody who's like, I just read the trades. Yeah. I read the trades. Like, my job is to sort of read about what the different research is going on. This is what I've heard. It's not even clear that it's happening at Pfizer.
from what I heard, but I hope it's careful.
Yeah,
And wow, look at this guy.
Reuters reported that they. Go
You know
ahead.
what'd be interesting is like documents.
Yeah.
Accelerate too much.
Yeah.
But I think they're also just trying to do it as an exploratory thing because you obviously don't want to advertise that you're trying to figure out future mutation.
Okay, so did the whole virus mutation thing like come from your executive, Sarah?
No, that came from we have chief scientific officers in the other divisions.
In a subsequent meeting, our undercover journalist asked if this type of gain-of-function research is already being studied at Pfizer.
It is not gain-of-function research.
The entire time he's like, no, you're not really using that term correctly.
Right. It's not. It's different from that. It's really different from that. And then the reason why you have O'Keefe sort of reinterpret what the guy says is because the guy doesn't necessarily say what they want him to say in terms of their video. And so you got to have O'Keefe come in and reinterpret it this way.
No, that came from we have chief scientific officers in the other divisions.
In a subsequent meeting, our undercover journalist asked if this type of gain-of-function research is already being studied at Pfizer. But no, as long as it's called directed evolution, Pfizer's in the clear.
What's the goal for Pfizer of doing that?
So probably what they want to do is to try to figure out, to some extent, there's all these new strains of variants that just pop up. Why don't we try to catch them before they pop up in nature, and we can develop a vaccine prophylactic for new variants.
Yeah.
So that's why they're thinking if you do it control in the lab, then we say, this is an epitope. And so then if it comes out later on, in the public, we already have a vaccine kind of working on it.
Oh my God, that's perfect.
All right, pause it. Now, let's be clear here. This is exactly what you want them to do.
Exactly. They're being proactive.
And they're not creating a variant that wouldn't otherwise exist. The whole point of this structured evolution is to try and anticipate what variant is going to happen in the real world. That's what they want to do. Prophylactically, they want to be able to give folks a vaccine. And this is sort of what they do. I don't know how they do this with the flu, how they anticipate what strain is going to be out there. But this is what you want them to be doing, anticipating and figuring out the best way to anticipate what the COVID that's going to exist, particularly, once we're now in an endemic period where we are going to be living with this maybe for the decades that we've been living with the flu that started in 1918. And so the idea is, how do we get ahead and know what vaccine? CDC did research on the bivalent, finds that it's about 50% effective in stopping infection, significantly better in reducing the severity of infection. So that's why you see such enormous amounts of people getting infected. And I don't want to say just 600 deaths, but if we were where we were in 2020, the number of deaths on a daily basis would be closer to 3,000, 3,500, maybe more.
And the case study of this being effective is the efficacy of the new bivalent vaccine, because they guessed right after doing these kinds of experiments, and this is they ended up creating something that's quite effective for this new strain.
When he has to do, say, structured evolution in quotes because the guy wouldn't say gain of function, that's a proof that this entire stunt was a failure.
Yes.
Because if the guy should have been saying, yeah, it's gain of function, but we call it that. But he's like, no, actually,
it's really
even
different
in the privacy of that, he's like, no, you're not getting that right.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's trying to say this to somebody who he's trying to hook up with.
Exactly.
Yeah. How gentle do you have to be in that situation?
He's trying to meet him halfway, but he's like, no, man, no.
And this guy's going oh, you're going to make a ton of money. Yeah, no kidding. That's what they're in this business.
Right.
It's the big surprise. Pharmaceutical companies are in it for the profit. No.
But not in the way that he's going to try to say, which is that essentially they're trying to create these viruses.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't that the best business model though? Just control nature before nature even happens itself, right?
Yeah. If it works.
Pause it just real quick. Anticipate a need.
Right.
What do you mean if it works?
Because like some of the times, like we just mutations that pop up, right? And we're not prepared for it, like with Delta or Omicron,
right,
and things like that. So who knows? I mean, either way, it's gonna be a cash cow. COVID will probably be a cash cow for us for a while going forward. Well,
yeah,
I obviously like it.
Well, I think the whole, like research of the viruses and mutating it, like, would be the ultimate.
Pause it right there. See what's going on here, right? This guy's saying like it's a cash cow, and you know how else you know this? You don't need to have someone go secret camera and ambush a mid-level worker to find this out. You can look at their stock and their shareholders meetings, which are public. But then this guy from Project Veritas is like trying to conflate a couple of things. Research of the virus, okay, yes, of course. And mutating it.
It mutates, bro.
It is not, they are not mutating it.
Yeah.
They are watching it mutate in a controlled environment so that they can anticipate what, now,
how to treat it.
People may say like, that's too dangerous. You shouldn't do that. Perfectly, I think, legitimate. But the bottom line is they're not mutating it. They're watching it mutate as a way of anticipating where they need to take the vaccines. And this guy's conflating them and making it sound like they are creating new diseases in which to provide vaccines for. And that's not what they're doing.
Yeah.
They are trying to observe the mutation of an existing disease.
Yeah, I mean, Big Pharma has already successfully cornered the market on responding to this sort of stuff. It's going to be a cash cow if there is a massive pandemic for them.
Indeed.
Yeah, it'll be perfect.
Now, you would think that creating viruses to sell the vaccine would be illegal. But no. The pharmaceutical industry, as Walker puts it, is, quote, a revolving door for all government.
It is illegal to create a virus.
Yeah.
For money.
And if they want to make this about a critique of pharmaceutical companies and for-profit medicine, I mean, I'm all for it, but that's not what this is.
No.
And this is the only time where it's a legitimate critique is coming up. The revolving door between regulators and these companies, which exists in business, in terms of like finance, in terms of DOJ, in terms of the EPA. This is a real problem. And I hope what comes out of this is some type of legislation that increases the pay and the security of people working for regulators so that becomes their job, period. And inhibits the ability of people who have left the government to in any way engage in these type of jobs that require them to come back to the government. We have something like that with lobbyists on some level, but we should do it across the board.
Yeah, and it's counterintuitive, particularly given our like libertarian sense of fighting DC corruption. But actually, like throughout history, that's been the way you fight it, is to pay people more to actually do the business of government.
Officials, unquote.
I have a revolving door for all government officials.
Wow.
Yeah, for any industry though. So like in the pharma industry, all the government officials who review our drugs, especially they come work for pharma companies. Like in the military, like all the like army and defense, like government officials eventually go work for the defense companies afterwards.
How do you feel about that revolving door? Like,
it's pretty good for the industry, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's bad for everyone else in America.
Why is it bad for everybody else?
Because if the regulators who have to approve our drugs know that once they stop being regulated, they want to come work for the company, they're not going to be as hard for the company. They were doing their job.
Right.
We talked to Dr. Robert Malone.
Pause it for 1 second. Pause it. We don't need to hear Dr. Malone comment on. In fact, that story we read from the American Prospect today on Jeff Zients was written by a guy from the Revolving Door Project, which I can assure you is not a conservative entity. And if you're worried about Revolving Door, Google Medicare Part D and how that passed with Tom DeLay and back during the Bush administration years. The guy who came up with Medicare Part D was literally interviewing for a position with the pharmaceutical trade organization, like a big pharma, like literally during it. I think his name was Benny. I can't remember who it was. This is a real problem. one which I can assure you no one on the right will take up. No one. But understand that video is all about anti-vax conspiracy stuff.
It's interesting, like how like the right has to this reality that business controls the government, particularly, like especially this revolving door thing. It's not like, oh, the nefarious Democrat government is sending its representatives into all these fields. It's no, like these people are all mercenaries. They work in the government for a little bit and then they go work for serve corporations. It's all corporate power.
Yep. And even this guy said, like, it happens in all industries.
How does he not?
Military, like defense contractors.
I'm worried about Jordan Tristan. What is his name? How does he not understand this is a setup at this point?
He seems pretty drunk.
Are so
he seems pretty drunk.
So,
I mean, he's on a date. They might have waited to break this out until they were 3 drinks in.
Oh yeah, he freaks out when apparently they let him know.
Yeah, so it's kind of there was a separate video where O'Keefe confronts him directly with his audio, and literally he says to him, "I was on a date trying to impress this guy. I was lying." he literally was like, I was just saying this stuff because I wanted to impress him. That's what guys do on dates. They lie.
Yeah.
And O'Keefe is like, oh, really? Oh, well, you said it, so.
But even then, he didn't even say that much. He was like trying to be agreeable, but also denied like most of the type of nefarious things you were trying to implant in the conversation.
It's just like, I mean, I know it's like not the real story here, but it's just so gross. So it's just gross to set someone up like that.
Well, it's cheap. I mean, like, I don't think like this sort of ambushing like on certain targets and even Pfizer people, it might be interesting, but like done by these people, it's just a waste of time.
Yeah.
No, to your point, he literally says at one point to O'Keefe, like, I don't know how I'm going to trust anybody on a date again.
Yeah.
Like, it's like that sucks. Like, just
sucks.
Emotionally, broadly, that's shit.
And I'm sure he's getting, like, he's worried for his safety because of these right-wing nuts are probably, now know his name and where he works.
And that's a lot of money he's probably out.
Yep. Cheese. Yes, it was Billy Townsend. He was a Republican congressman, I want to say from like Tennessee maybe or somewhere like that. I can't remember. But he went on to basically write the drug bill for Medicare and then get a job with Big Pharma. Like was interviewing during that fight.